The dust swirled around Captain Jake Morrison's boots as he walked through the empty mining facility. The alien metal walls gleamed in the pale light of Kepler 442b's twin suns. He moved slowly, his hands behind his back like a man taking a casual stroll through his own backyard. Jake knew they were watching him. He could feel 10 pairs of eyes tracking his every movement from the shadows. The Zephyrians were good at hiding, but humans had learned to sense danger during their short but violent expansion into the galaxy. His heart beat steady and strong in his chest. No fear, no panic. Just the calm focus that had kept him alive. Through 3 wars and countless battles, the mining facility stretched out before him like a metal forest. Tall support beams reached toward the ceiling, and strange alien machinery sat silent and covered in dust. The Zephyrians had built this place 60 years ago, back when they thought this world belonged to them. They had learned differently. But that was a story for another time. Jake stopped in the center of the main chamber. The floor beneath his feet was made of the same blue-green metal as the walls, polished smooth by decades of use. He could see his reflection staring back at him, a weathered face marked by years of fighting and hard decisions. His gray hair was cut short in military style, and his blue eyes held the kind of steady confidence that came from knowing exactly what he was doing. "Come on out," Jake said to the empty air. His voice echoed off the metal walls. "I know you're there." "Oh, 10 of you," silence answered him. But Jake was patient. He had learned patience during his 25 years in the Terran Defense Corps. He had learned it during the siege of New Dallas, when he held a position for 6 days against impossible odds. He had learned it during the evacuation of Centauri Prime, when every second meant the difference between life and death for thousands of civilians. The first shadow moved behind a support beam 50 feet to his left. Jake didn't turn to look, he just smiled. "Commander Vexthara," he said, speaking to the air. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." The shadow stopped moving. Jake's smile grew wider. "Oh yes, I know who you are. The Serpent of the Outer Rim, the one who single-handedly destroyed the rebel fleet at Proxima Station. 23 victories in personal combat. Never been defeated in battle." A low hiss echoed through the chamber. Jake recognized it as Zephyrian laughter, but there was no humor in it, only cold amusement. "And here I thought humans were supposed to be stupid," a voice said from the shadows. It was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but underneath was the hardness of tempered steel. "Yet you know my name and my record? How interesting." Commander Vexthara stepped out from behind the support beam. She moved with the fluid grace of her species, her 4 arms held in perfect balance. Her scales shifted from the dull brown of camouflage to their natural purple color, which gleamed like polished gemstones in the facility's light. She stood 8 feet tall, with a serpentine lower body that coiled and uncoiled as she moved. Her head was crowned with a crest of bone and cartilage that rose and fell with her emotions. "I make it my business to know my enemies," Jake said. He turned to face her, still smiling. "Just like I know about the other 9 warriors you brought with you." "Do you indeed?" Vexthara's crest rose slightly. "Then you know that each of them has killed more humans than you have probably seen in your entire life." "I'm sure they have." Jake's voice remained calm and conversational. "The Zephyrian military doesn't promote based on kindness." More shadows began to move. One by one, the other 9 warriors emerged from their hiding places. They came from every direction, surrounding Jake in a perfect circle. Each one was a master of combat, selected personally by Vexthara from thousands of candidates. They moved with the deadly precision of apex predators, their weapons ready, their eyes fixed on their target. Jake stood in the center of the circle and looked around at the assembled warriors. He took his time, studying each face, each stance, each weapon. He nodded approvingly. "Very impressive," he said. "I particularly like the positioning. Classic Zephyrian tactical formation. Maximum coverage, minimum chance of friendly fire, multiple escape routes for the survivors." "Survivors?" Vexthara's voice carried a note of surprise. "You speak as if some of us might not survive this encounter." "Oh, I guarantee some of you won't," Jake said cheerfully. The question is which ones? The warriors shifted slightly, their weapons rising a few inches. Jake could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. These were professional soldiers, trained killers who had conquered worlds and brought entire species to their knees. But something in Jake's manner was making them nervous. "You are alone," Vextara said. Her voice carried the tone of someone trying to convince herself as much as her target. "Our sensors show no allies within 3-star systems. Your ship is disabled in orbit. You have no weapons except that primitive projectile pistol at your side." Jake glanced down at the pistol holstered on his right hip. It was indeed primitive by galactic standards, a simple chemical propellant weapon that fired metal bullets. Most species in the galaxy had moved beyond such crude technology centuries ago. But humans had found that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "This old thing?" Jake patted the pistol affectionately. "I've had it for 15 years. Killed my first alien with it during the Proxima campaign. A Zephyrian warrior, as it happens. He was about your size, Commander." Vexthara's crest flattened against her skull, a sign of growing anger. "You think one primitive weapon will help you against 10 of the galaxy's finest warriors?" "Oh, I'm not planning to use the gun," Jake said. He looked around the circle again, his eyes meeting each warrior's gaze in turn. "I'm planning to use something much more effective." "And what might that be?" Vexthara asked. Jake's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold determination. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a man who had commanded fleets and decided the fate of worlds. "I'm going to use the one thing that makes humans different from every other species in this galaxy," he said. "The one thing that has let us survive every war, every invasion, every attempt to wipe us out." The warriors leaned forward slightly, despite themselves. Even in the face of certain victory, they wanted to know what this strange human thought could save him. "I'm going to use hope," Jake said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Several of the warriors exchanged glances, their crest displays showing confusion. Hope was not a weapon. Hope was what prey animals clung to before they died. "Hope?" Vexthara's voice carried disbelief. "You think hope will protect you from plasma rifles and monomolecular blades?" "I think hope is the only thing that ever has," Jake replied. "You see, Commander, you've made a fundamental error in your calculations." "And, what error is that?" Jake began walking toward the nearest warrior, a massive Zephyrian whose combat record included the destruction of an entire human colony. The alien's 4 eyes tracked Jake's approach, confusion rippling through his crest display. "You assumed that being surrounded was a disadvantage," Jake said, still walking. "But sometimes being in the center of things is exactly where you need to be." He stopped just 3 feet from the warrior, close enough to see his own reflection in the alien's polished weapons. Close enough to strike, if he had been planning to strike. "My 10 best warriors have you surrounded," Vexthara said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Jake turned to face her, his smile returning. But this time, it was different. This time, it was the smile of a man who knew something that everyone else in the room was about to learn. "Good," he said. "I needed the exercise." The silence that followed Jake's words was different from the quiet that had filled the facility before. This was the silence of predators who had suddenly realized their prey might be something else entirely. The 10 Zephyrian warriors remained in their perfect circle, but their stance had changed. Where, before, they had been confident hunters, now they were wary professionals dealing with an unknown threat. Commander Vexthara's tactical mind worked at incredible speed, processing thousands of variables in seconds. Her species had evolved. On a world where hesitation meant death, where only the smartest and strongest survived to pass on their genes. Her brain was a weapon as sharp as any blade. And right now, it was telling her that something was very wrong with this situation. "Exercise," she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "You speak as if this is some kind of training scenario." Jake nodded, as if she had said something perfectly reasonable. "In a way it is, though the stakes are a bit higher than usual." He began walking again, this time toward a different warrior. This one was smaller than the others, built for speed rather than strength. Her name was Silmara, and she had earned her reputation by killing 47 humans in single combat during the Battle of Titan's Edge. Her twin plasma blades hummed with deadly energy as Jake approached. "You see," Jake continued, his voice conversational. "Humans have this peculiar habit of learning from every encounter. Every fight, every battle, every war teaches us something new about ourselves and our enemies." Silmara's blades shifted slightly, tracking Jake's movement. But she didn't strike. Something in his manner kept her weapons at ready, but not in attack position. "What have you learned about us?" Vexthara asked, despite herself. She was a commander, and commanders needed information, even when that information came from an enemy who should have been begging for his life. Jake stopped in front of Silmara and studied her with the same attention he had given the others. "I've learned that Zephyrians are incredibly skilled fighters. Fast, strong, smart. Your tactics are brilliant, your technology is superior to ours in almost every way." "Then you know you cannot win?" Silmara said. Her voice was higher than Vexthara, with a musical quality that would have been beautiful in other circumstances. "I've also learned," Jake continued, ignoring her comment, "that Zephyrians have one critical weakness." The tension in the room increased. Every warrior's weapon rose slightly, ready to fire at the first sign of threat. But Jake seemed completely unaware of the danger surrounding him. "And what weakness is that?" Vexthara demanded. Jake turned to face her, his blue eyes steady and calm. "You fight to win. Humans fight to survive. There's a difference." "Explain," Vexthara said. She was genuinely curious now, which bothered her more than she cared to admit. Jake began walking again, this time toward the center of the circle where he had started. "When you fight to win, you fight until you achieve victory or until victory becomes impossible. When you fight to survive, you fight until you're dead. There's no middle ground." He reached the center and turned slowly, looking at each warrior. "In turn, you've surrounded me because you want to win quickly and efficiently. Minimum risk, maximum effect." "Very professional." "Of course," Vexthara replied. "Why would we do otherwise?" Because," Jake said, his voice growing quieter, "sometimes the quickest way to win is to make your enemy think they've already lost." The warriors exchanged glances, their crest displays showing the first signs of uncertainty. This human was talking like he had some kind of advantage, but their senses showed nothing. No hidden weapons, no allies, no escape routes. Just one middle-aged human with a primitive pistol and an attitude that didn't match his situation. "You're playing games," Vexthara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Jake asked. "Let me ask you a question, Commander. Why did you bring 10 warriors to capture one human?" "Because you are dangerous," she replied immediately. "Your military record shows 63 confirmed kills in personal combat. You've been decorated for valor 12 times. You've commanded successful operations against superior forces on multiple occasions." "All true," Jake agreed. "But that doesn't explain why you need 10 warriors. 1 or 2 should have been enough to handle a single human, no matter how skilled." Vexthara's crest began to rise, a sign of growing agitation. "We wanted to ensure success." "No," Jake said firmly. "You brought 10 because you're afraid." The reaction was immediate. Several warriors hissed, their weapons moving closer to firing position. But Jake continued speaking, his voice calm and steady. "You're afraid because humans keep doing things that shouldn't be possible. We keep winning fights we should lose. We keep surviving when we should die. We keep finding ways to turn defeat into victory." "Luck," Silmara said, but her voice was uncertain. "Is it?" Jake asked. "How many times can you get lucky before it stops being luck and starts being something else?" He began walking again, this time toward a warrior who stood near a support beam. This one was older than the others, with scars that spoke of countless battles. His name was Kethver, and he had been fighting humans for more than 20 years. "Kethver," Jake said, and the warrior's eyes widened in surprise. "You fought at the siege of New Dallas, didn't you?" The old warrior nodded slowly. "How do you know my name?" I told you I make it my business to know my enemies. You were there when we held the city for 6 days against the entire Fifth Fleet. You held it for 6 days because you were too stupid to surrender? Kethva replied, but his voice carried a note of respect despite his words. We held it for 6 days because we had to, Jake corrected. Because behind us were 50,000 civilians who couldn't fight for themselves. Because giving up wasn't an option. You lost in the end? Kethva pointed out. Did we? Jake asked. The civilians got away. The fleet was delayed long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The war turned in our favor after that. Tell me, Kethva. Who really won at New Dallas? The old warrior was quiet for a long moment. You did, he finally admitted. We did, Jake agreed. Not because we were stronger or faster or better armed. We won because we refused to lose. Because we fought with something you don't understand. Hope, Vexthara said, her voice flat. Hope, Jake confirmed. The absolute, unshakable belief that no matter how bad things get, there's always a way forward. Always a chance to turn things around. Hope is a luxury of the naive, Vexthara replied. Reality is what matters in war. Jake laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the metal chamber. Reality is what we make it, Commander. You see this situation as 10 warriors surrounding one human. I see it as 10 opponents who have conveniently gathered in one place where I can deal with them all at once. Deal with us? Somara's voice carried disbelief. You have 1 primitive weapon against 10 plasma rifles and 20 molecular blades. I have something better, Jake said. I have the knowledge that I'm not fighting for victory. I'm fighting for survival. And that means I'll do things you would never think of. Take risks you would never take, make sacrifices you would never make. He stopped walking and faced Vexthara directly. You brought 10 warriors because you wanted to guarantee success. But by doing that, you've guaranteed something else entirely. What? Vexthara asked, despite herself. Jake's smile returned, but this time it was different. This time it was the smile of a man who had just realized he was exactly where he needed to be. You've guaranteed that when I walk out of here, I'll have the greatest victory of my career, he said. 10 of the galaxy's finest warriors defeated by one human who refused to give up. You're insane, Vexthara said, but her voice shook slightly. No, Jake replied. I'm hopeful, and that's something you've never learned to fight against. The facility around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The word hope hung in the air like a challenge that none of the Zephyrian warriors knew how to answer. They were trained to fight enemies with weapons, with tactics, with technology. But how do you fight an idea? How do you kill something that lives in the mind and grows stronger when faced with impossible odds? Vexthara felt her tactical computer running scenarios at maximum speed, but every calculation led to the same conclusion. 1 human, 10 warriors, certain victory for her side. Yet something was wrong with the math. The human's confidence wasn't just bravado. It was real, solid, based on something she couldn't see or understand. You speak of hope as if it were a weapon, she said, her voice carefully controlled. But hope doesn't stop plasma bolts. Hope doesn't turn aside molecular blades, doesn't it? Jake asked. He gestured to the facility around them, the metal walls that gleamed with alien technology. Tell me, Commander, what do you know about this place? Vexthara's crest flattened slightly. It's an abandoned mining facility. Built by our people 60 years ago, abandoned when the resources ran out. That's what your intelligence reports say, Jake agreed. But intelligence reports don't always tell the whole story. He began walking again, this time toward a section of the wall that looked different from the rest. The metal here was darker, older, with symbols carved into its surface that didn't match Zephyrian writing. This facility was built on top of something else, Jake said, running his fingers along the strange symbols. Something that was here long before your people arrived. Long before humans arrived, for that matter. Several of the warriors shifted uneasily. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse with their own inner light, growing brighter as Jake touched them. The Zephyrian survey teams found this place and decided it would be perfect for mining, Jake continued. Rich mineral deposits stable? Ground, no native life forms to worry about. They started digging, going deeper than anyone had ever gone before. We know our own history, Vixthara said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Do you? Jake asked. Do you know what the miners found when they reached the deepest levels? Do you know why they abandoned this place so suddenly? The facility around them seemed to grow quieter, as if the very air was listening to Jake's words. The warriors could feel it now, a presence that hadn't been there before. Something ancient and patient and very much alive. They found chambers, Jake said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Rooms that weren't on any geological survey. Spaces that seemed designed for something other than mining. And in those chambers they found evidence of the previous inhabitants. The planet was uninhabited, so Mara said, but her voice shook slightly. Our scans confirmed it. Above ground, yes, Jake agreed. But below ground was a different story. The miners found cities, libraries, technology that made your most advanced equipment look like stone tools. And they found something else. He turned away from the wall and faced the assembled warriors. They found the builders still alive, still waiting. A sound echoed through the facility, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of stone and metal. The warriors looked around nervously, their weapons tracking movements that their eyes couldn't see. Waiting for what? Vexthara demanded. For someone worthy, Jake replied. You see, this world wasn't just a mining site. It was a testing ground. The builders, the ones who lived here before, they were teachers. They created this place to test species who came from the stars. The rhythmic sound grew louder, more distinct. It was footsteps, massive and deliberate, coming from somewhere deep below the facility. Test them for what? Kethver asked, his scarred face showing the first signs of real concern. For wisdom, Jake said simply. For the ability to work together, instead of conquering each other. For the strength to choose cooperation over domination. The footsteps were getting closer now. The warriors could feel vibrations through the metal floor, as if something enormous was ascending from the depths of the planet. The human colonists who came here 60 years ago passed the test, Jake continued. They found the builders and learned from them. They discovered that there were threats in the galaxy that no single species could face alone. Threats that required unity, cooperation, hope. You're lying, Vexthara said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Am I? Jake asked. Then explain. Why your people abandoned this place so suddenly. Explain why the mining records stop without explanation. Explain why this facility has been left untouched for 60 years. The first of the builders emerged from a tunnel entrance that hadn't been there moments before. It stood 12 feet tall, its form a mixture of organic curves and crystalline structures that seemed to shift between different states of matter. Its eyes held the weight of geological ages, and when it looked at the assembled warriors, they felt like insects being examined by a giant. The test has been observed, the builder said, its voice resonating through the facility's structure. Itself. The judgment will be rendered. The Zephyrian warriors raised their weapons instinctively, but their plasma rifles suddenly felt inadequate. What good were energy weapons against beings who could reshape matter with a thought? Lower your weapons, Jake said, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even himself. They're not here to fight. They're here to judge. Judge what? Vexthara asked, though she found herself obeying Jake's command. Whether your species is ready to join the alliance, Jake replied. Whether you can learn to work with others instead of conquering them. More builders emerged from tunnel entrances that materialized in the walls. They surrounded the group, but unlike the Zephyrian warriors, their circle felt protective rather than threatening. The humans showed us that hope could triumph over fear, the first builder said. They proved that cooperation was stronger than conquest. They earned the right to call this world home. But we're not the only ones being tested, Jake added. Every species that comes here faces the same choice. Fight and face the consequences. Or learn what it means to hope for something better. The builders moved closer, their ancient eyes studying each warrior in turn. Vexthara felt exposed, as if every thought and memory was being examined and weighed. "Your people have great strength," the builder said to her. "Great skill in battle. But strength without wisdom is meaningless. Skill without purpose is wasted." "What do you want from us?" Vexthara asked. "The same thing we wanted from the humans," the builder replied. "The same thing we want from every species that finds its way to this world. We want you to choose." "Choose what?" Jake stepped forward, placing himself between the Zephyrians and the builders. "Choose whether you want to be part of something greater than yourselves. Choose whether you want to face the future alone or together." The facility around them began to change. The walls became transparent, revealing the vast underground city that stretched beneath the planet's surface. Humans moved through the chambers alongside other species, working together on projects that defied easy understanding. "This is what we've built," Jake said, gesturing to the city below. "Not just humans, but dozens of species working together, learning from each other, preparing for what's coming." "What's coming?" Silmara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Something that will make our little conflicts look like games," Jake replied. "Something that requires every species in the galaxy to work together if we're going to survive." The builders watched silently as the Zephyrian warriors processed what they were seeing. The underground city was larger than any of their home colonies, more advanced than their greatest technological achievements. "The choice is simple," Jake said. "Join us and discover what your species can become when hope guides your strength. Or leave and face the future alone." Vexthara looked at her warriors, seeing uncertainty in their crest displays for the first time in their careers. They had built their reputation on strength, on the ability to overcome any opposition through superior force and tactics. But strength, they were learning, could mean different things. "My 10 best warriors have you surrounded," she said again, but this time there was no threat in her voice. Only confusion and something that might have been hope. "Good," Jake said, his smile returning. "Because we're going to need every warrior we can get." The silence that followed Jake's words was different from anything that had come before. It was the silence of minds being forced to accept a reality they had never imagined. The 10 Zephyrian warriors stood frozen in their circle, their weapons still raised but forgotten, their eyes fixed on the impossible city that stretched beneath their feet. "Commander." Vexthara felt her world shifting around her like sand in a storm. Everything she had believed about this mission, about this planet, about the balance of power in the galaxy, was crumbling before her eyes. The builders watched her with ancient patience, waiting for her to process what she was seeing. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been here?" "We have walked these halls since before your son was born," the first builder replied. Its voice carried harmonics that spoke directly to the mind, bypassing the ears. "Entirely. We have watched species rise and fall, seen empires bloom and wither like flowers in the cosmic wind." "And you test them all?" Kethver asked. The old warrior's scarred face showed wonder instead of his usual hard suspicion. "Not all," another builder said, materializing from what had seemed like solid wall. "Only those who show promise. Only those who might be ready to face what lies beyond the edge of known space." Jake walked closer to the transparent floor, gazing down at the bustling city below. Humans worked alongside beings he didn't recognize, their forms so alien that his mind struggled to process them. Yet they worked together with an efficiency that spoke of long partnership and mutual respect. "What lies beyond?" Silmara asked, her twin plasma blades finally lowering as curiosity overcame training. The builders exchanged looks that carried meanings no organic mind could fully grasp. When the first one spoke again, its voice carried a weight that pressed against their minds like a physical force. "The Devourers," it said simply. The temperature in the facility seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even the builders, ancient and powerful as they were, showed signs of unease when speaking that name. "They come from the spaces between galaxies," the builder continued. "They consume everything in their path. Stars, planets, entire solar systems. They turn matter into energy and energy into more of themselves." They have already consumed 7 galaxies in this cluster. 7 galaxies, Jake repeated, his voice hollow. How many species? Trillions, the builder replied. Perhaps more. They do not count individuals. They see only mass to be converted, energy to be absorbed. Vexthara's tactical mind tried to process numbers that large and failed. Her species had conquered dozens of worlds, subjugated hundreds of species, but trillions, entire galaxies, when will they arrive here? She asked. 200 of your years, the builder said, perhaps less. They have already entered the outer edge of this galaxy. Their scout ships probe our defenses even now. Scout ships? Jake asked. Ships the size of your moon, another builder explained. Each one capable of consuming a star system in a matter of days. The main fleet follows behind, a swarm that blocks out the light of stars. The warriors looked at each other, finally understanding the scope of what they faced. Their petty conflicts, their territorial disputes, their wars of conquest, all of it was meaningless in the face of such a threat. What can we do? Silmara asked. How do you fight something like that? Alone, nothing, the builder replied. Even we, with all our technology and wisdom, cannot stand against them by ourselves. But together, united, there might be a chance. Jake turned away from the city below and faced the Zephyrian warriors. That's why we're here. That's why this test exists. The builders need to know which species can work together and which ones. We'll fight each other until the Devourers arrive to finish the job. And what happens to the species that fail the test? Vexthara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. They are left to face their fate alone, the builder said. We cannot risk the alliance for those who choose conquest over cooperation. The facility around them began to change again. The walls showed images now, scenes of other worlds, other species. Some showed bustling cities like the one beneath their feet, filled with different races working together. Others showed empty planets, their surfaces scarred by weapons of unimaginable power. These are the worlds of the Alliance, the builder explained, indicating the thriving cities. 47 species who have chosen unity over dominion. They share their knowledge, their resources, their strength. And these? Jake asked, pointing to the devastated worlds. These are the worlds of those who failed, the builder replied sadly. Species who could not overcome their need to conquer. They fought each other until there was nothing left to fight for. One of the images showed a world that Vexthara recognized. It had been a Zephyrian colony, abandoned 50 years ago after a plague wiped out the population. But now she could see that it hadn't been a plague at all. The scars on the planet's surface were from weapons fire, the marks of a civil war that had consumed everything. You destroyed Sekthar Prime, she said, her voice filled with accusation. No, the builder replied gently. Your people destroyed it themselves? We simply removed our protection when they chose to fight each other instead of working together. Your protection? We shield the worlds of the Alliance from detection, another builder explained. The Devourers cannot find what they cannot see, but we can only protect those who are worthy of protection. Jake walked over to where Vexthara stood, her forearms trembling with rage and confusion. This is the choice, Commander. This is what it all comes down to. Your people can join the Alliance, contribute their strength and skill to our common defense, or they can continue their wars of conquest until there's nothing left to conquer. You're asking us to give up everything we are, she said. Our culture, our way of life, our very nature. No, Jake replied firmly. I'm asking you to become more than you are. The Alliance doesn't want to change your nature. It wants to channel it toward something worthwhile. He gestured to the images of the thriving worlds. Look at those cities. Every species there was a warrior race once. The Kethani were pirates who raided merchant ships. The Veltar were cannibals who ate their enemies. The Zorthak were hive-minded killers who knew only destruction. What happened to them? Kethver asked. They found something worth fighting for that was bigger than themselves, Jake replied. They learned that the greatest victory isn't conquering your enemies. It's turning them into allies. The builders moved closer, their ancient forms radiating a patience that had endured for eons. The choice must be made now, the first one said. Your fleet orbits this world, waiting for your signal. You can call them down to attack this facility. Try to claim this world by force. Or you can take a different path. What different path? Vexthara asked. You can choose to trust, Jake said simply. You can choose to believe that there's a better way than endless war. You can choose hope. Over fear, the commander looked at her warriors, seeing the same uncertainty in their faces that she felt in her heart. They were soldiers, trained from birth to fight and conquer. But they were also intelligent beings, capable of seeing the truth when it was placed before them. If we join this alliance, she said slowly, what happens to our military, our warriors? They become the protectors of 48 worlds instead of the conquerors of one, Jake replied. They fight against the greatest enemy the galaxy has ever known. They become heroes instead of villains. Vexthara closed her eyes and tried to imagine it. Her people working alongside humans and dozens of other species. Their skills turned toward protection instead of destruction. Their strength used to build instead of tear down. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. Commander Vexthara opened her eyes and looked directly at Jake Morrison. For the first time since entering the facility, her weapons were completely lowered. Her crest, which had been rigid with tension and aggression, now showed the colors of deep thought and careful consideration. If I make this choice, she said slowly, if I choose to trust you, to join this alliance, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply use us as soldiers in your war? Jake met her gaze without flinching. None, he said honestly. You have no guarantee except my word and the evidence of what you've seen here. But let me ask you a question in return. What guarantee do you have that your current path won't lead to the destruction of everything you claim to protect? The builder who had spoken first moved closer to the group. Its ancient form seemed to pulse with inner light as it prepared to speak. The alliance is not built on guarantees, Commander. It is built on trust. Each species must choose to believe that cooperation serves them better than isolation. Vexthara looked around at her warriors. These 10 soldiers represented the finest her species had to offer. They had followed her across 3 star systems, trusted her judgment in countless battles, obeyed her orders without question. Now she was asking them to trust her in something that went against every instinct they had ever developed. Kethver, she said, addressing the scarred veteran. You fought humans at New Dallas. You saw what they could do when cornered. What is your assessment? The old warrior was quiet for a long moment, his 4 eyes studying Jake with the intensity of someone reading a tactical manual. They fought like demons, he finally said, but they fought to protect something, not to destroy it. There is honor in that kind of battle. Silmara, Vexthara continued, turning to the swift warrior with the twin blades. You have studied human tactics for years. What do you think of this proposal? Silmara's blades had been completely deactivated now, hanging silent at her sides. Their tactics make no sense from a conquest perspective, she admitted. But if the goal is survival, if the goal is protection rather than domination, then everything they do makes perfect sense. One by one, Vexthara consulted her warriors. Some were skeptical, others were curious, but none of them recommended immediate attack. They had all seen too much, learned too much, to dismiss what they had witnessed as deception. The fleet above us, Vexthara said to Jake. What happens to them if I make this choice? They become the first Zephyrian ships to join the alliance. Defense grid, Jake replied. Your captains will work alongside human, Kethani, and Veltar commanders. Your warriors will train with soldiers from 47 different worlds. And if they refuse, Jake's expression grew sad, then they leave. The alliance doesn't force anyone to stay. But they also can't return to the old ways of conquest. Too much depends on secrecy, on unity. Those who leave must find their own path. The facility around them continued to show images of the alliance worlds. Cities that gleamed with impossible architecture, ships that moved between stars like schools. Of fish, beings of dozens of different species working together on projects that none of them could have accomplished alone. Show me the weapons, Vexthara said suddenly. If we face an enemy that can consume galaxies, show me what we fight. Them with the builders gestured, and the images changed. Now they showed massive ships that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Weapons that could crack planets, shields that could protect entire star systems, technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves. We have been preparing for 200 years, one of the builders explained. Every species that joins the Alliance contributes their knowledge, their resources, their unique perspectives. Together we have created defenses that no single species could imagine. And it might still not be enough, Jake added honestly. The Devourers have consumed 7 galaxies. They've had millions of years to perfect their methods. But together we have a chance, alone we have none. Vexthara walked to the transparent floor and looked down at the city below. She could see her own reflection in the surface, overlaid on the image of dozens of species working in harmony. For a moment, she tried to imagine herself down there, working alongside humans and aliens she had never seen before. My people have been warriors for 10,000 years, she said. We have conquered because we believed it made us strong. But perhaps true strength lies in knowing when not to conquer. She turned back to face Jake and the builders. Her decision was clear in every line of her body, every color that flickered across her crest. I choose trust, she said simply. I choose hope. The change in the facility was immediate. The walls, which had shown images of other worlds, now displayed star charts showing Zephyrian space. Fleet positions became visible, along with human and alliance ships that had been hidden from sensors. Your fleet commanders are receiving new orders now, Jake said, checking a device that had appeared on his wrist. They can choose to follow your lead or depart peacefully. They will follow, Vexthara said with confidence. I chose these captains myself. They trust my judgment. Even in this? Especially in this, she replied. They have seen the same endless wars, the same pointless conflicts. Many of them have wondered if there was a better way. The builders began to fade, their forms becoming translucent as they prepared to return to whatever realm they normally inhabited. But before they disappeared completely, the first one spoke again. Welcome to the Alliance, Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Empire. Your people's strength will be a great addition to our common cause. Not the Zephyrian Empire, Vexthara corrected. The Zephyrian Republic? If we are to be part of something greater, we must change what we are to match what we aspire to become. Jake smiled, and this time there was nothing mysterious or challenging about it. It was the smile of someone welcoming a friend home after a long journey. There's going to be a lot of work to do, he said. Integration isn't easy. Your people will need to learn new technologies, new tactics, new ways of thinking about warfare. And humans will need to learn about Zephyrian methods, Vexthara replied. We may choose cooperation over conquest, but we have not forgotten how to fight. Good, Jake said. Because in 200 years, we're going to need every advantage we can get. The 10 Zephyrian warriors who had surrounded Jake with the intention of capturing him now stood in a circle around him for a very different reason. They were the first members of what would become the Joint Species Defense Force, the military arm of the Alliance that would stand against the Devourers. My 10 best warriors have you surrounded, Vexthara said one last time, but now her voice carried warmth and the beginning of friendship. Good, Jake replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. We're going to need every warrior we can get. Vexthara looked at the offered hand for a moment, then reached out with one of her 4 arms and grasped it firmly. The handshake between human and Zephyrian was brief, but it sealed an alliance that would endure for generations. Above them, in the space around the planet, ships that had been enemies began moving into new formations. Human and Zephyrian vessels took positions side by side, their weapons now pointed outward toward the unknown threats that waited in the darkness between stars. The first test was over. The real war was about to begin, but for the first time in galactic history, they would face it together.